Additional aids and services are available upon request to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, you may contact us by email by clicking Help or sending an email directly to pdportal@tamu.edu. You can also contact us by phone, including Relay Texas, at 1-800-441-7323 or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas, 77843.
Welcome to the CASAS overview. Our presenters today are Linda Taylor, the Director of Assessment Development, and Jane Eguez, and she's the Director of Program Development. And my name is Olga Escamilla, and I'm your host and moderator. We also have Tracy Hendricks, Dr. Glenda Rose. Thank you all for joining us. I just want to provide a reminder that participants on this webinar will not receive PD credit for attending. So if you're on, you will not receive PD credit because this is an informational webinar. But thank you for joining us. We want to welcome our facilitators today. We have Linda Taylor again. She's the Director of Assessment Development, and Jane Eguez, and she's the Director of Program Development. So welcome, Linda and Jane.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad so many of you could attend today. Again, my name is Linda Taylor, and I'm here with Jane Eguez. Jane, do you want to say hi?
Good morning, everybody. Glad to join you today.
Okay, so we're going to be presenting an overview of CASAS for youth in Texas. We can go for an hour, and then at that point, we'll see where we are. And if any of you would like to stay a little longer, in case we have a little more to present, we're going to offer that opportunity. But let's see how we go. All right, let's go to the next slide.
Linda, you'll be advancing the slides on the left-hand side.
All right, there we go. All right. So the big news that we're so excited about is that after a long time, we've been wanting to be approved in Texas for many, many years, and it just finally happened, so that starting this July, there is an opportunity for you to use CASAS for accountability reporting. So we're just extremely excited to be able to share CASAS with you. It's used all over the country in 35 states, so we're happy that Texas is now number 36. We have assessments, standardized assessments in reading, listening, and math. We have our CASAS e-test, which is our computer delivery that the test taker uses to take the test. And we have our back-end software called TOPS Pro Enterprise, or TE, and that's what is used to score the test, to track the scores, and to do generate many, many reports. We do require training to get started with CASAS, and we know that we've been working already with TCAL about that. So more about that a little later. We're going to share with you a couple of special projects that we have for transition. NEDP is one of them, and workforce skills certification. So one thing we want to be sure to tell you is that CASAS is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for a long time, since 1980. Our sole mission is to develop basic skills assessments for adult education programs. And all of us who work at CASAS, who do training and test development, are from the field of adult education and rooted in the field and very much committed to the ideals and the principles of adult education in all the work we do. We consider ourselves a national leader in adult basic ed and adult ESL assessment. We are approved by the U.S. Department of Ed for NRS reporting in both ABE and ESL. And, of course, with that approval comes a lot of technical documentation of our tests, a lot of research behind them. The CASAS system, if you see on the left-hand side, there are 4 components. And the first 3, we feel it's very important that they be integrated in a program. So it's not just to lay assessment on top of anything that you're doing, but that the curriculum and the instruction piece should all be aligned to the assessment so that what the test taker is seeing makes sense to them, what the teacher is teaching is related as well. So that's why CASAS means Comprehensive Adult Assessment Systems. So the system part is that it is all integrated together. And then, of course, we have accountability that is required and I think also helps to require excellence in terms of how the tests are delivered. We have something called CASAS competencies, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and basic skills content standards in the areas of reading, listening, and math. Our computer-delivered tests are available now not just on regular desktop computers or laptops, but also, very excited about this, on Chromebooks and iPads, which are portable, and Chromebooks certainly less expensive. So we think it opens a lot of options for testing in your programs other than a computer lab. We also offer paper. So if that's something that your program needs to do, whether entirely or at some sites, that's quite possible. And the research that we've done for our approvals with NRS have shown and that it's possible to mix them. So you could possibly test with paper for a large intake process and then follow up with e-tests for post-testing. Of course, you can do e-tests pre and post, and you can do paper pre and post, but you can also mix them. We have something called Quick Search Online, which is a free software that's available on our website that we work with the publishers, the adult ed and ESL publishers. They send us their materials. It's updated always. We have one person devoted to doing that, so that relates all available instructional materials to our tests, to the competencies and content standards. So that's a way to link available materials to our assessments. We don't produce any of our own materials. Then, as I mentioned, our TOPS Pro Enterprise software scores the tests. It provides reports, and we'll look at that a little bit more in detail in a minute. Of course, with group or individual administration is possible. The e-test that is computer delivered, of course, the paper testing is also very much validated, so you're fine with paper. With e-tests, we do find in some ways that it does streamline, certainly, and in some ways improve the quality of assessment because there's a little less human error involved with the computer doing the scoring and tracking and next test. There's reductions in staff time as part of that efficiency, and as I mentioned, now it's more affordable. Excuse me. With the paper, there are reusable test booklets, and our pricing is very cost-effective. We're extremely affordable. We know you don't have a lot of money, so we try to be sensitive to that. Our training is free, and we're working, as I said, with TCAL on providing that for Texas in the way that you do your training. And we'll be looking also later, but just to make sure you understand that we do have sample test items on our website that are free, and those can be downloaded so that you can see the kinds of items in the various modalities, reading, listening, and math, and share them with teachers, share them with your students to prepare them for the test. So just want to make clear which of our tests are available and approved for ESL and ABE. So starting with ESL, our tests are approved like all of the other NRS-approved tests, Best Literacy, Best Plus, TABE, Class E. Like all of those tests, our ESL tests are approved through February of 2021, so another couple years. And the tests that ESL programs can use are the following. For reading, they can use the Life and Work Reading 80 series. At the very low literacy level, we have two alternate test forms called Beginning Literacy. And then at the high level, more academic in content, if you want to use for transition, is Reading for Language Arts. Those are secondary level tests which are also approved for ESL and can be used. And they're all on the same scale, so you can use them continuously. You could start with Beginning Literacy, move right into Life and Work Reading, and then if the student goes all the way through up to Reading for Language Arts, or the Life and Work reading also goes up into our highest levels as well. Then for listening, we have our series is called Life and Work Listening. It's the 980 series, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little later. Now for ABE, our new goals series is the first test to be approved for ABE and adult secondary. It's the 900 series, and it has the full approval, 7 years through, it was approved last year, so through 2025. So that is something that can be used starting in July for sure for ABE. Now for math, we have submitted our math goals series for ABE, and we are waiting to hear from the U.S. Department of Ed about approval for that. We hope to really hear any day now, and as soon as we hear, we will let you know. But I do need to make it clear that as of this moment in time, we, for July of 2019, we do not have an approved math test. Our currently approved math tests are being used all over the country through this June, but those tests are only approved until June. So as soon as we hear, and hopefully the answer will be yes, that the Math Goals series is approved, then that will be something you can use in July. And for those of you who have been using the tape, just wanted to let you know that we do not have a language test. We never have had a language test, and we feel that it's not necessary because some of the important aspects of language are already embedded in our reading test. And we feel that we'd like to do as little testing as is necessary to appropriately place students in the correct level and the correct test form for the pretest. We feel that if a program would like to do more, additional diagnostic testing in areas of English usage or conventions, then certainly that can happen once they're in class. So if you decide to use CASAS for ABE, you would only be using two modalities, reading and math. Any questions?
Linda, there is a question from Robert Anzaldua. He says, I did not get a screenshot, but is the Form 80 appraisal allowed for ABE as well? So
currently it is being used, and you cannot use it as a pretest. An appraisal can be used for screening, like if you're at a workforce development board, but the appraisal is like a locator, which is used to determine the appropriate pretest form. So, and once we have another appraisal for the reading goals. It's called the 900 reading goals appraisal, and the math goals has its own appraisal too once it's approved. So currently the Form 80 appraisal will continue to be used for ESL, but once the reading goals and math goals are approved for ABE, there's a new goals appraisal for reading and math. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? Okay. Then,
Jane, I'm sorry, there is one question. Does TWC allow AEL providers to not assess ABE students in language? That is a TWC question. Is there anyone from TWC on? Tara, we might have to hold that question and respond to that later. And then go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't presume to answer TWC questions, but I would say that I have asked them that question, and they said yes, that it's not necessary. That if you are using CASAS, you only need to test for ABE in reading and math. So you would not have to test in language. That's my understanding. All right. So now to summarize about our goals series and their NRS approval status, let me just finish this slide, and then I'll answer the other questions. So the goals series is like this. As I mentioned, the reading goals for ABE is approved and is ready for you to use in July. Math goals we are waiting to hear. Now, reading goals, the very same test for ESL was submitted to NRS for approval last October. We normally don't hear until the following spring or summer or later, depending on how many questions they ask us. So that is pending, and there is the current ESL tests, as I mentioned, are approved through February of 2021. So there's still time. But just I wanted to explain that CASAS has always used the same test, same reading test for ABE and ESL. So we understand and absolutely would expect that instructional strategies, all aspects of instruction would be different for ABE and ESL, tailored to their particular needs. But when you are assessing a student's ability to read. So there we see that they can be the same for ESL and ABE. So the very same reading goals test that was already approved for ABE, we submitted last October, and we are waiting to hear that it will be approved for ESL. As soon as we hear, we'll let you know. And then our listening goals is currently in development. We're doing our final research studies between now and July. And if you'd like to participate in that, we'd love to have you be part of it. We're planning to submit that this coming October. So for all of the goals series, they are aligned to the higher standards that are represented in the College and Career Readiness Standards and in your Texas standards, and as well in the English Language Proficiency Standards, which are also which also contain higher order thinking skills. All right, let me go back. I see there are a lot of questions coming in, and some of them I may be addressing later. But all right, let's see. We have yes, we're working on the revised assessment guide.
Linda, if you could
yes.
read the questions, or if you want me to read them, because we record this and we play it back later, people aren't actually going to be able to see the questions if they're not live. So would you like for me to read the questions?
Oh no, I can do that. So
okay.
Or will I guess one question was, will the fact that you only need to take 2 tests for CASAS be incorporated in the new assessment policy? And Tracy responded that TWC is off today and they will defer to the test publisher's recommendations, and that also TWC is working on a revised assessment guide right now as we speak, and we are working with them on it, and CASAS will be in the new assessment guide. So when someone asked a question about how the appraisal and the locator are different, and Jane from CASAS responded that the appraisal functions like a locator. It places the test taker into the correct pretest level. So the appraisal, and I'm going to cover this in just a minute, but I'll just say that the appraisal is what you use when you do the paper testing, and it's longer than the locator, but they have the same function. They are not approved for NRS reporting. They don't need to be approved for NRS reporting. OCTAE, the U.S. Department of Ed, only approves the pre and the post tests. All right. So now let's go to the next slide. Here you can see the CASAS scale, and this is the one that relates to ABE. And you can see the 6 levels on the left, from beginning literacy up to advanced adult secondary. And you can see the CASAS scale ranges from about 150 to over 246, up into the 260s. So it covers the full continuum of ability in ABE and ESL. And we have skill level descriptors that give some idea of what a student can do generally in each of these score ranges. And these are descriptors that a student can take with them to show publishers or just to know how they're doing. And yes, we do offer grade level equivalents. They're on our website. So if you need to use grade level equivalents, they're there. I think very soon, as you start using CASAS, you can start to speak the language of CASAS scale scores and be able to communicate with each other and with students about their progress in those terms. But if you need grade level equivalents to communicate with your training providers, et cetera, then we do provide them. Here you can see, and this is on our CASAS website, www.casas.org. This shows the NRS levels for ABE in the first chart. The CASAS levels, we have our tests are leveled. A is the lowest level up to D, and then E can be if you're scoring in the very high ranges. And you can see the score ranges for the life and work reading, which is the currently approved one, the reading goals, which is the one you start using in July, and for the currently approved math one, between now and June can be used. And for ESL, you can, and these will continue to be used starting in July, the 6 ESL levels, the CASAS test levels, and the life and work reading scores, as well as the life and work listening scores. So you can see this on your own and study it a little bit more on the CASAS website. Here we can see if you're with a WIOA 1 program for youth, they envision the levels as 8 continuous levels. And it's nice because you can see how the ESL levels start lower. And this is also one of the benefits of the CASAS scale, because you could have a student that, let's say, begins in ESL and is taking the CASAS reading test, and then keeps going and transitions at some point possibly into ABE. So with such a student, they would stay on the CASAS scale. You can see it here. And then you would just keep post-testing as they transitioned into ABE. So there's clarity about where they would place in ABE, and you don't have to go to another test with a different scale, but keep going with reading up through the levels all the way up to high adult secondary if the student goes that far. And here you can see the grade levels for the current series. On the chat box, the link for the grade levels was just posted. So, but if you search, you go to the website and you just, there's a search box at the very top. And if you search on CASAS grade levels, you'll come to that same page. All right. Now, I know a lot of you are interested in test timing, so let me try to explain that clearly to you. If you test in 2 modalities, which I understand you must, generally it takes 2.5 to 3 hours, whether for ABE or ESL. So how that breaks down is that as far as the first step, the intake goes, if you're using e-tests, the locator is only up to 15 minutes. It could even be less depending on the student. And that's for each modality. So there's a reading locator, there's a math locator, there's a listening locator. Then the appraisal, as I said, is a bit longer, 30 minutes. And if you're using paper, you must use the appraisal because we don't have the shorter locator available for paper. So you would have a 30-minute appraisal. And if you wanted to use the appraisal, you can. It's also on e-tests. But generally, if you're using e-tests, you use a short locator, which works quite well. Then, for the pre- and post-tests, for ABE, you would go into the new reading goals for ABE, ASE. And when you're on e-test, the student takes the short locator, 10 to 15 minutes, and then seamlessly the back-end software scores the test and immediately places the student into the pretest, the appropriate pretest, based on their short locator score, and puts them right into a pretest. So for reading, if they're going into level A, it's a 60-minute test. And if they're going into any of the other levels, B, C, or D, it's up to 75 minutes. So you need to allow 75 minutes. It can take less, 50, 60 minutes, but to be fair, you need to allow 75 minutes in case the student needs that much time to demonstrate their ability. Then for math, the new math goals is the same, more or less, except that for the math goals, we've combined the lower 2 levels, A and B, and the higher 2 levels, C and D. But the lower level is 60 minutes, the higher one is 75. So you can see that if you're taking for ABE, if you're taking the short locator plus, let's say, a level B test, you've got 15 minutes from plus 75, you're up to an hour and a half. And then if you did the same for math, you would be at 3 hours. But a student may not take that long, so it could be 2.5 to 3 hours. So that gives you a general idea. Same thing for ESL. It would be the life and work reading is the ESL test that's approved now, and the listening. So those tests currently are 60 minutes each. Then as far as the time, I don't know if there's any questions about the timing of the tests. So what we recommend for the time between pre- and post-tests is 70 to 100 hours of instruction and not less than 40 hours. So these are our guidelines, and we've found that if you test more often, it not only is taking a lot of time away for instruction, it's over-testing because students then can become, maybe not take the test as seriously, may not be as motivated. This allows enough time for them to demonstrate their progress and not expose the test items too much. So 70 to 100 hours is what we recommend, and not less than 40. This is an overview of the assessment process. So in the first step is a screening phase, and where if a student, we have some screening tools, and the very, very lowest students that would go, for example, in the beginning literacy test that I mentioned earlier, would not even take a locator or appraisal. They could be screened right into the level A or the beginning literacy test, depending on how low they are. So there's that intake screening that we will cover in the training, which we'll be doing in the spring in person when we come. So that placement is the first step. That then will tell you which pretest the student should take. So from the pretest, they get a baseline score, and there are reports that will tell where the student was strong and weak in the two tests that they took. Then there's instruction. And then the post-test after 70 to 100 hours, where the next test, that's the appropriate test, if they're in the e-test, will be automatically assigned by the software when the student signs back in, or you do that for them. And on paper, we have a chart that will tell which is the next appropriate test to give as a post-test. So this is the Life and Work Reading Series, the one that you'd be using for ESL in July. And the way our series are structured is that there are two alternate forms at each test level. So the gray ones here are the beginning literacy, then the blue ones are the level A, and they're numbered 81, 82. So they're alternate forms at the same level of difficulty. Then the next level is the 83, 84, etc. So that's how it works, and students would progress through the levels as they improve their reading ability. And if a student, let's say, is quite low when they take the first form of level A, the 81, they might take the 82, and if they're still not ready for the 83, they go back to the 81. So that's how the next assigned test will guide the forms being administered. We have test administration manuals that are essential for the paper-based and the computer-based tests, and they have all the answer keys, everything you need, scoring guides, score conversion charts, those next test charts. They also contain the content of each test in terms of the competencies and content standards. So it's all in one. There's no, you don't have to purchase a whole bunch of things. Everything that you need to know is here, and also a lot is on the CASAS website. But this test administration manual is a sort of one-stop shop for all of these supports. Now, in terms of test content, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the new Reading Goals series, which has CASAS competencies, but the focus of instruction is on the content standards. We have our own CASAS reading standards, which are aligned now. We just revised them in 2016 and just actually updated them now. About to post that on our website. But they're strongly aligned now to the college and career readiness standards in the area of reading. and Reading Foundations at the lowest level. We also have something called Reading Task Areas, which is about the format of the reading passage, whether it's text, whether it's a chart or a table, whether it's a form or some other format. And that's another way that we report out diagnostic results, so that's a way that you can assist students to improve their reading in terms of the type of format of the reading. And then we're very much tuned into depth of knowledge, or DOK, in terms of the cognitive difficulty of the reading and of the questions. CASAS competencies have been around since we started in the early 80s, and they are pretty much a comprehensive list of the kinds of functional life skills and work skills that adults need to function for all their literacy and numeracy needs. And I would say in our assessments up until recently, the focus was both on the competencies and on the content standards, but in our new goals series, we use the competencies as context to make sure that the content is relevant, but the focus of the assessment is more on the content standards, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean by that, but more than before, it's on the content standards. So here you can see the content blueprint for the Reading Goals series in terms of the content standards. So there are three major areas: vocabulary, and then two kinds of reading comprehension skills, basic and more higher order. On our website, there is a test blueprint for each level. Excuse me, I don't have time to go through it today in detail, but at every level, about 20 to 25% of the test are vocabulary items, which is R4 in the reading anchors. So that's something new for CASAS. We didn't have items focused per se on vocabulary. At the lower levels, these are high-frequency vocabulary words and phrases. At the higher level, they are academic and meaning from context type of vocabulary. The reading comprehension skills category is, this category focuses on depth of knowledge area 1, which is recall, which could be locate detail or simple main idea or author's purpose relating to these CCR anchor standards. And then the higher order reading skills, which encompass DOK 2 and 3, are such things as locating and also comparing details, inference, drawing conclusions, which is R1 in the CCR standards, text structure and features, author's point of view, and then at our level D, the highest level, we cover the topic of analyzing claims and arguments. So that's where it gets to be truly higher order reading skills. And when you go to the website, I do encourage you to go there, and you'll see that as the levels go up in difficulty, they progress from at the level A. There are no items that test the higher order reading skills. But by the time you get to level C, 40% of the test is higher order and 40% is the reading comprehension, and at the very highest level, 55% of the test is the higher order reading skills. Here are the DOK levels in case you're not familiar with them, and you can look them up online. For our vocabulary, we used this academic word list that was developed in New Zealand based on research of academic texts, that is, looking at the most frequently appearing words in those texts. And it's a somewhat limited list. It's still pretty big, but 570 words. And so when we did targeted vocabulary, we did draw from this list and also tried to use these words as much as we could in the reading passages. So if you go online, you can find this, and that should help to give you some guidance as to what the content is on our vocabulary words. So we have sample test items on our website for all modalities. I encourage you to go there and take a look. Just with our limited time today, I can show you a couple of items. here's one from our new reading series that is at the level C, and it shows a short passage. One thing I want to point out is that we tried, and I think succeeded, in having the passages not only be relevant this is a workplace context, so of interest to our students, but also we tried to keep them short and yet to use complex text. So this is how we were able to keep the time to only up to 75 minutes for even the level C and D, because we used shorter text, which takes a long time when a student is taking the test. That's what takes some time when they're going through. And we also put several, sometimes up to 5, but almost always at the higher levels, at least 2 or 3 to 5 items with each reading passage. So that's another way that we economized on the time of the test by putting more items to one passage. Not too many, because we needed to cover a range of content, but enough so that they could realize that if the text was challenging, they can see on the e-test, they can see that it's 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4. They can see that there are 4 items, so it's worth their while to dig in and try to tackle the text. You can see we have numbered lines, so we can refer to certain lines in the text. And in this item, we have an underlined word, which is the target vocabulary word, which is also underlined in the question. And there you can see these academic vocabulary words being tested. Here's another example at the highest level, level D question, and it's testing inferring and drawing conclusions. Again, you can see it's a high-interest topic. It's not long, but it's challenging. So, and the question is also challenging. Which statement would make the best conclusion to the article? And you can see even the distractors are a little longer and complex text. So this is how we were able to keep it interesting, but also not too long. For our listening test, this series has 3 levels, A to C, and one of the things that is of interest, I'm sure you'll find, is that it's only oral. There is no reading. So this is where we are measuring truly their listening ability and not confounding it with their reading. And it actually is a little bit easier to focus. It's challenging, of course, to have to listen, but we only have 3 distractors for these questions, not 4 as we do in reading. And so the test is delivered on CD. If you're in a paper environment, there's only one very small test booklet at level A that has photos in it. Otherwise, everything is just oral. And on the computer, they can advance themselves. The items are repeated at the lower levels, not later on. So they can go at their own pace on the computer, which is a nice feature of taking it on the computer. So encourage you to go and look at the items on the website to get some more idea of these questions. The Math Goals series is also rooted in the CASAS competencies, but measuring higher order math skills as in the CCR standards and in your Texas standards in these categories. So it is skills that are academic and required, but for employment settings and other life contexts. And everything is in a context. So it's applied math. We've gone to great efforts and pains to make sure that the items, some of them are just computation, but they are in an applied context. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail. We have 15 minutes to go, so I just want to, just a few more things about the math goals is that there are word problems. They're simple to advanced calculations. The formula are provided, so there's not a need to memorize them. They're provided when they're needed. There are situational scenarios that are reflecting real-world applications. Calculators are provided. we have the guidelines for those. They're basic calculators. I'm going to show you in 1 second what they look like. So just here's the design of the test where the level AB covers up to NRS 3 and entry into 4, and the level CD covers overlaps. So it starts at 3 and goes up into entry into adult secondary. This is an overview of the content for the in the categories, the content domains, and on the lower level and the higher level, what percentage is covered at each of these domains. Now you can't see that, but when you can go online and see it. Also, here's what the calculator looks online. There's an icon in the top right, which if they click on, looks like that. So it's available throughout the test, but they can use it whenever they need it. All right, so now I'm going to move on to the training requirements. And of course, for the computer-delivered tests, there are test administration manuals by test series, by test type. And for the paper, there are the reusable test booklets for each series. We actually have the reading tests in separate booklets from the math. There are answer sheets that are generic. We also have ones that you use that can be scanned and uploaded into the TOPS Pro Enterprise software. The e-tests and TOPS Pro work together. We're in these many states using the e-test, so we're glad to see it's being used across the country. As I mentioned, nowadays it's more affordable. All of our tests are available on the e-test platform, so that's another nice feature is that if you are using the e-test, any test is there, so you don't have to order a new test series when it becomes approved. Anything that's available, that's approved, is there to be selected and used. Our web test units, those are test administrations, never expire. And as I mentioned, you can use a combination of the paper and the e-test if you need to. For accommodations, with the touchscreen, actually all of our tests are touchscreen compatible. So we do recommend that you use that you have some computers, at least a few. If you have a lab, if you get Chromebooks, get the touchscreen type. iPads, of course, are touchscreen. Because we found that students who are not familiar with computers are quite comfortable with the touchscreen, and perhaps unexpectedly, the very lowest level students who are not tech savvy are the ones who can be most comfortable or even more comfortable using a touchscreen than the paper because it's less muss and fuss than trying to negotiate an answer sheet and which item am I on, et cetera. So in a way, the touchscreen works better with these lower level students who are not tech savvy. We do allow up to double time, and we've made a lot of adjustments in our formats and all for low vision in terms of the font, the layout, and all of these things. So we have short practice tests online that you can see what they look like. There are two levels of implementation. There's what's called basic, which you get with the WTU, and you get a report called the Individual Skills Profile. You get the Individual Competency Report. You get, at the end of every test, this personal score report comes up. I'll show you in a second what that looks like. You can see the test history of everyone who's taken the test in your program that has all this information. The next assigned test is there. You can see how many test administrations are left, and you can export anything, pretty much anything, into a third-party data system or into an Excel file. All right, so that's the basic implementation with the WTUs, and then we have something called enhanced, and that's where you can get a class report. So if you identify students that are in a certain class, you'll be able to see, for example, what percentage of the class got a certain item right and other aspects of how the class is doing. You can do more extensive data tracking at the class, site, and agency level, track clients in multiple programs. You are able to do instructional hours, and you can do a lot more drilling down into reports to see, for example, which students haven't post-tested and other kinds of things like that, and other kinds of data tracking features. So in order to use the e-test, there are some required trainings that are free and online. Every site has to have a coordinator, and then anyone who's going to give the test has to be a proctor that's certified online. And then there's also everyone must take the basic implementation training in order to use the computer version. And then there's an online agreement that is to do with test security and making sure that your test center is following important test security and other kinds of procedures. We have online a Going Live checklist and quite a lot of other resources to help you get started. And then once you do those trainings, you can then purchase these web test units to get started, and you can always call our tech support by dialing option 2, and that is live human help to help you and hold your hand to get started. So those are the steps to try out the e-test. This is what the report looks like when the student finishes a test. There are other reports that cover the competencies, the content standards, the task areas that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to go quickly through these very quickly, but you can study them more. There are copies of the webinar like this, PowerPoint, on our website that you can see these in more detail. But this is an individual student profile that you can see the listening and reading scores. This is an ESL student. Their scale scores, what NRS level they are. Then you can see for the reading competencies and content standards what percentage they got right in these categories, same for listening, and also the task areas. Then this is a competency report for a student on a particular test and telling which items they got right or wrong, which competency it was covering, which task area. So this is at an individual student level. At the enhanced level, this is where a class report where you can see that 27% of the class got item 30 right, and these are sorted. So this is the item that most of the students got wrong, 27%, but then it's in ascending order as far as how many, what percent got subsequent items correct. So and it shows the test question and the competency and other aspects. Here, this is also for enhanced, where you can see a student test summary. You can see their test history with their which forms they took. This is a basic report that shows the next assigned test, which is also done automatically, but if you want to see what's coming next, you can see it. You can record instructional hours in the software. You can generate reports like this if you want to show people or just see how different sites or sub-sites are doing in your program or classes. And this is where you can drill down and see, for example, here this column says no post-test, so you can see which students have yet to post-test, and that's a way you can go pick up using post-tests in your program. So in order to get started, you would need to decide if you're going to do ESL or ABE or both using CASAS. We're going to be doing face-to-face trainings in April and possibly May. We'll be there to train some master trainers. We're working closely with TCAL to do this, and there will be some TOT trainings in April and May. We're going to set up those dates soon. We also have a CASAS Summer Institute if you'd like to come in June and see for yourself. It's a great experience and a great way to learn more about CASAS. these are those e-test training requirements that I went over earlier. So for paper, you'd also have to do the initial training. You would be purchasing materials. We do offer sets of only 5. So if you're a small program, that's something that we hope you find convenient because they're cheaper and you can get all the forms in a test series in sets of 5 or 10 or 25. Scannable answer sheets. I think I covered this earlier. I want to show, I have 5 minutes left, and I'd like to quickly show you the pricing. This is a flyer that shows about e-tests and TOPS Pro Enterprise. And you can see the prices. I don't know if it's big enough. Let me enlarge that a bit. This is for the basic, the WTUs, and minimum order is 100. You can get for 100 to 500. The price is $285. If you can, as I said, the WTUs don't expire. You can order in bulk. Pay as little as $1.75 for each of those administrations. Now, if you want the enhanced version, and here it shows a little, again, what's included in basic and what's in enhanced. These are the prices. So this would be both for the e-tests as well as the TOPS Enterprise units or the enhanced access to TOPS Pro Enterprise. So there, instead of $285, it's $345, and if you're in the highest bracket, it's only $235. So just a little bit more to get that additional capability with the enhanced package. So we have 2 programs I want to very quickly share with you. One is the National External Diploma Program, where it's a separate program which uses CASAS for students to enter in it, but it awards a local high school diploma using competency-based assessment, and it's online. So if you're interested in this, we'd be glad to share about, it's an alternative to the GED or HiSET or TASC, and it works for students who have test anxiety or would like a different route to getting a high school diploma. We have something also called, so the Workforce Skills Certification System also uses the basic skills assessment scores, the reading or math or reading and listening, and then, but adds on soft skills. We have a partnership with a soft skills assessment. And so what it can produce is a student profile that a student can use to show an employer, to demonstrate that they have the skills needed for a job. And there is a certificate that documents a high level of achievement. But even if a student, let's say, has intermediate level math and somewhat higher reading, but that's all that a particular job requires, then this is ideal for that situation where they can show that they have the skills needed for a particular job, and that way show that they're capable and ready, a good candidate for the job. So if you're interested in this, we'd love to share this additional program with you. We think it's something that really works well for collaboration with, now that we're much more involved with our partners in WIOA One. So we can share this with you. For targeting instruction, as I said, we have Quick Search Online. We have our competencies and content standards. The Quick Search Online is free. You're welcome to explore it on our website. I'll leave it at that for now. Please go to the website and explore. There's a lot there that can help you. We are doing programs, research studies with both the GED and the HiSET to be able to let you know what score on a CASAS test a student would need in order to be likely to pass the GED or the HiSET. And unfortunately, we don't have a cooperative arrangement with the TASC, but with the GED and HiSET, we are almost done with the HiSET study, and we still need more students for the GED. So what we need is a student who is about to take the GED or HiSET or has just taken it and would take the CASAS assessments And then when we pair them, that's how we can come up with the results for this study. So if you'd like to be part of this, please let us know so we can finish these studies. As I mentioned, we're doing field testing for our listening as well. If you'd like to come to the Summer Institute, this is the information, June 11th to the 13th in Orange County. Go to our website for more details. If you would like tech support, it's available from 9 a.m. Eastern until 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to get started, some of you have asked if you can pilot, and we would be open to that. And I assume the state would. I know the state is at least to a limited degree, but I just need to caution that you would not be able to use the test results now to report. That you would not be able to report until July. But if you would like to try it out and get set up and ready to go, we are very ready to work with you now and would very much welcome that if you'd like to try it out. And that is these some sample test items for the math test, just so you can get a bit of an idea of the content and how we've done these in an applied context. So for number sense, here's a couple of examples. At the basic level, just an item about fractions in terms of sales tax. And at the higher level, using exponential notation in algebra. Both at the basic level, a little bit. It has to be there according to the standards, and it's challenging, but we were able to do that. Simple one-step equations at the lower level. And at the higher level, the equation of a line given 2 points. Geometry, equally represented at the lower and the high level. So this is a lower level one with parallel lines. And then at the higher level, about angles. Then for measurement, again, pretty much equally represented at both the low and the high levels. A perimeter question, an irregular shape. And here we have statistics and probability. So how many people ate at the lunch cart on Tuesday at the lower level, and then at the higher level, summary statistics of a data set. All right, I think that's all I have here. So now, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Linda. I have a couple before this one that just came through. So the first one is, do you also happen to have a correlation to the Global English Scale?
Oh, no, but in fact I met Sarah Davila at Paley, and we are going to start communicating with her. Don't have it now, but it's something we're going to look into.
Okay, so when I saw the question come through, I emailed Sarah, and she said she does have it. She expects to have it up on the website at the end of March, but if you want to contact her directly, she'll get that to you.
Thank you, Glenda. The next question or statement is, from a placement perspective and not merely accountability documentation, the two big areas of instruction for HSE are the math and writing. Sometimes the reading assessments do not reveal areas to be addressed in the writing workshop, which may be geared towards writing an essay or addressing grammar mechanics and vocabulary development, etc. How are these instructional domains determined with CASAS in the reading assessment?
So in the reading assessment, there, as I mentioned, there is about 20% of the test is focused on vocabulary. And at the higher levels it is, and that would be the HSE prep, it's focused on academic vocabulary. So that is covered quite strongly in the new reading goals assessments. As far as grammar and mechanics, they are embedded. I mean, in order to answer some questions, you must have an understanding of grammar and mechanics in order to be able to make it through and do well in those reading questions, but they are not covered per se. And as far as writing is concerned, no, it's not. So those would have to be things, as I mentioned earlier, that you would need to be covering with either informal assessments within your classes, and So, that could be very much tailored to the needs of the students. So that, in a way, could be a way to do it more efficiently. As I said, with the reading and math assessments, we feel that that's usually enough to know, to see how the student is progressing. But if you do need to do additional assessment within the class, that would be necessary. I will tell you that we are, within the next year, we hope, going to be making available an essay that is going to have automated essay scoring. It will not be NRS approved, but it will also not be very expensive. So it's a tool that we are going to make available, because we know that that writing is so important, and it's a tool that we want to make available so that you will be able to easily assess a student's essay ability using a holistic rubric, and that way see if they would be ready to pass an HSE.
Thank you, Linda. And the last question I have is, when do you expect the math portion to be approved?
We just don't know. It could be any day now. We do expect to hear it soon. We've been waiting for a while, and it's just we don't know. We do periodically inquire and ask our contact at the U.S. Department of Ed, but it takes time. So as soon as we hear, we will let you know. As I said, it could be in the next day or week or month, but hopefully soon, because I know it's difficult to make a decision not knowing about the math.
Thank you. And the next question is there a required number of hours between the same series tests? Example, student takes pretest in 81 and then post-test in the same.
So the way it works, and maybe I can go back to the slide a little bit. Basically, the time between tests is always 70 to 100 hours, but the student would never, according to our CASAS system, would never take the same exact test form twice in a row. So here you can see the test form. So let's say a student takes an 81. They would then, as a post-test, they would take the 82 after 70 to 100 hours. And then often they will go on to the 83. But if they are, so then they wouldn't go back to the 81, or then they wouldn't take the 82 again, ever. So they would go 81, 82, then 83, or they might go 81, 82, and then if their level is still low, they could go back to the 81. So between every test, there should be 70 to 100 hours.
Thank you. And how the next question is, do the locators use a testing unit or e-test?
No, they do not.
And then do we have to pay for each locator?
No, you do not. The locator is free and will put the student right into the pretest. So that's a nice benefit that we offer, is there's no charge for the locator.
Okay, next question. What type scanner is required to score the paper or pencil version?
Oh, that information is on the website and also in our catalog, but whatever you've been using for the TABE is also sufficient for CASAS.
Okay, any other questions? This is the time to ask. Thank you. I want to thank Linda and Jane. Jane's been typing some responses in the chat box, so I want to thank you both. And again, if there's any questions, this is the time.
We thank you for your time, and we appreciate this opportunity.
Tracy, did you want to add anything?
This is Tracy, and I just wanted to share and piggyback on something that Linda said, is that we will be planning for Jane and Linda to come in either late April, early May to do a couple of local TOT assessment trainings statewide. So we may be asking some questions via survey to determine who is really interested in sending a local trainer, and have possibly two cities, somewhere in the north part of Texas, somewhere in the south, and have them come and do a couple of TOT trainings. And then they're also going to work with us on training some local master Texas trainers so that when you need more assessment trainings and TOTs, we can provide them as well. So we will get that information out to you. We're still pinning down people and dates and that kind of thing, but kind of look for that maybe April, early May if we don't get to April.
And Grace, did that answer your question? Did Tracy answer your question? Because I think Grace.
Yeah, well, they offer these courses again. And Grace, I don't know if you need. Okay, perfect. Because we are recording this informational webinar. We've got to do our accessible magic to it before we can release it out. We'll do that very soon, and then it will be available if you have staff that did not get to listen to this. We may also, if there's a large interest, we may have them do another one in March if needed. So let us know what your needs are and what your questions are.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody,
Perfect.
for staying on past our end time. We appreciate you being here and asking these questions. Again, if you have any other questions, please, now is the time to ask while we have Jane and Linda on. Otherwise, I'm going to end the webinar.
All right.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you.
Olga.